On a quiet summer night in 1912, the small town of Villisca, Iowa, was forever changed by a crime so brutal, so horrifying, that it remains unsolved to this day. 8 people, an entire family, and 2 young houseguests were butchered in their sleep. The killer used an axe, not just any axe, but Josiah Moore's own axe, crushing their skulls with such force that blood splattered across the walls and ceilings. But what makes this case even more chilling? The eerie details left behind. Every mirror and window was covered with cloth. A plate of uneaten food sat on the table, and an unnerving silence filled the home, as if the horror still lingered within its walls. This is the story of the Villisca Axe Murders, a tale of horror, mystery, and the paranormal that continues to captivate and terrify more than a century later. The victims of this horrific crime were the Moore family, a well-loved household in the community. Josiah Moore, a respected businessman. His wife, Sarah, a devoted mother. Their children, Herman, 11, Mary Catherine, 10, Arthur, 7, and Paul, 5. Also staying the night were Lena Stillinger, 12, and her younger sister Ina, 8, 2 close friends of Mary Catherine. Earlier that evening, the Moores and the Stillinger girls had attended a church event, singing hymns and laughing together. Little did they know, this would be their final night alive. The Moore family was beloved in Villisca. Josiah was known for his kindness and generosity, while Sarah was a devoted mother and active member of the community. Their children were bright and full of life. But on the night of June 9, 1912, their lives were cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. The Moore family returned home around 9:30 p.m. As the town drifted into sleep, the killer moved silently through the night, creeping into the Moore residence, axe in hand. What happened next is the stuff of nightmares. The intruder struck each victim in their sleep, swinging the axe with brutal force. Skulls were crushed, and the sheer ferocity of the attack left walls, ceilings, and furniture drenched in blood. But here's where things become even stranger. The killer covered every mirror and window as if they couldn't bear to look at their own reflection. A plate of food was left on the table untouched, and in the guest room near the axe, a bloody slab of bacon was found on the floor. Why? Was the killer sending a message? Or was this the ritualistic work of a deranged mind? Whoever they were, they didn't just kill and flee. They stayed, lingering in the house for an unknown amount of time before vanishing into the darkness. The next morning, Villisca woke to a nightmare. Neighbor Mary Peckham, worried about the unusual silence from the Moore home, went to check on them. She knocked, no answer. She tried the door, locked. Sensing something was terribly wrong, she called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. When Ross entered the home, he was met with a scene of sheer horror. 8 bodies. 8 lives were stolen in a single night. Blood soaked the walls and ceilings. The bodies had been carefully posed as if in mock reverence. Some of the victims had cloth placed over their faces. The killer had left no footprints, no fingerprints, nothing. The town of Villisca was thrown into panic. Who could have committed such a heinous crime, and why? Sheriff Hank Horton led the investigation, but it became clear the small-town police force was in over their heads. The crime scene was contaminated, with townsfolk and curious onlookers trampling through the house, touching evidence and destroying crucial leads. Authorities found only a handful of clues. The axe, left in the guest room, a kerosene lamp placed oddly at the foot of the bed, and that eerie, uneaten plate of food. No footprints, no clear motive, no suspects. But as the days passed, suspicion spread like wildfire, and a list of possible killers began to emerge, each with their own secrets, motives, and unsettling connections to that fateful night. Not all killers need a reason. Some are simply drawn to the darkness. That's what made Andrew Sawyer so unnerving. He was a drifter, a man with no roots and no past that anyone could verify. In the days following the Villisca murders, his name kept surfacing. Not because of direct evidence, but because of his strange and unsettling behavior. A homeless man. No past, no future. Just a shadow on the outskirts of town. After the murders, Sawyer couldn't stop talking about them. He was obsessed, constantly asking questions only the killer might consider. His co-workers noticed his strange habits. He refused to sleep without his clothes on, as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. He kept an axe by his bedside at all times. Though he was interrogated, no evidence could tie him to the crime. But one question remained. Was he just another man haunted by the murders? Or did he know more than he was saying? Perhaps the most disturbing suspect of all was a man who claimed to be God's messenger, yet harbored sinister inclinations. Reverend George Kelly was in Villisca on the night of the murders, having come to teach at the Children's Day service, the very event the Moore family attended just hours before their deaths. Kelly was no ordinary preacher. He was a deeply troubled man, one with a past filled with erratic behavior and scandalous accusations. He had been caught peeping into windows, asking young girls to pose nude for him, and had been institutionalized for his mental instability. In the weeks following the crime, Kelly became obsessed with the case. He wrote letters to authorities, offering strange unsolicited details about the crime, details only the killer might have known. Investigators became suspicious. They baited him, drawing him deeper into the web of his own words, until finally, in 1917, 5 years after the murders, Reverend Kelly confessed. But there was a problem. His confession had come after hours of grueling interrogation, and soon he recanted. The jury didn't believe his story, and after 2 trials, Kelly was acquitted. Was he an innocent man, broken by his own mind? Or had Villisca let a murderer slip through its fingers? Every small town has its secrets. Power and envy ran beneath the surface like an underground current in Villisca, and at the center of it all was Frank F. Jones, a well-known state senator and businessman. Josiah Moore, the murdered patriarch, had once worked for Jones. But after years of loyalty, Josiah broke away to start his own competing business, a decision that cost Jones dearly. Even worse, rumors swirled that Josiah had been involved with Jones's daughter-in-law. Did Jones want revenge? Many believed that Jones was responsible and suspected that he had hired someone to kill the Moore family. But a politician could never get his hands dirty, not directly. That's where William Blackie Mansfield came in. A drifter, a criminal, a man with a history of violence. William Mansfield was known to authorities, and his name came up in connection with the Villisca case in a shocking way. Some believed Senator Frank Jones had hired him to kill the Moore family. Mansfield had a disturbing past. Just 2 years after the Villisca murders, his own wife, child, and in-laws were found murdered with an axe. Even more chilling, the crime scene bore an unsettling resemblance to the one in Villisca. The victims' faces were covered. A lamp was left burning at the foot of the bed. A basin of water sat in the kitchen, likely used by the killer to wash up before leaving. The pattern was too similar to ignore. Had Mansfield been a serial killer with a specific method? Or had he simply been a hitman, hired to silence the Moore family forever? Detective James Wilkerson was convinced he had found his man. He even gathered evidence that placed Mansfield near the crime scene the night of the murders. But then, just as the case seemed ready to break, Mansfield produced an alibi backed by payroll records. He was set free. But was his alibi real? Or had money and influence played a part in setting him loose? Not all killers leave town after their crimes. Some stay, some strike again. In the months following the Villisca murders, similar axe killings began popping up across the country. The details were nearly identical. Families slaughtered in their beds, windows covered, lamps left burning. One man became the focus of these suspicions: Henry Lee Moore. but in the end he had no relation to the Villisca victims. Henry was later convicted for killing his own mother and grandmother with an axe. Could this have been the work of a single madman, drifting from town to town, leaving a trail of blood in his wake? If so, then perhaps Villisca was just one stop along his killing spree. Decades later, a new theory emerged. Crime researcher Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy James studied similar cases and proposed a chilling possibility that a single serial killer was responsible for dozens of axe murders across America, including the Villisca case. They called him the man from the train. What if the Villisca Axe Murders were not an isolated crime? In the years surrounding 1912, similar axe murders took place across the Midwest. Entire families slaughtered in their sleep. The scenes were eerily identical. Homes near railroad tracks, windows covered, lamps left burning at the foot of the bed. Crime researcher Bill James proposed a chilling theory that one man, known only as the man from the train, was responsible for them all. This mysterious serial killer followed a pattern. He chose victims who lived near train tracks, ensuring a quick escape. He used the blunt side of the axe, crushing skulls beyond recognition. He covered mirrors and windows as if hiding from his own reflection. Was Villisca just one stop on his cross-country killing spree? And if so, was Paul Mueller, the man suspected of a similar 1897 crime in Massachusetts, the true face behind the unspeakable horror? Despite the leads, no one was ever convicted. The case remains unsolved to this day. More than a century later, the Villisca Axe Murders remains one of the most terrifying unsolved crimes in American history. Theories abound, but the truth remains buried in the past. The house still stands, a monument to the horror that unfolded there. Some say the spirits of the Moore family linger, forever trapped in the place where their lives were stolen. Today, the Moore house is considered one of the most haunted places in America. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported hearing whispers, footsteps, and even children's laughter. Some have seen shadowy figures and apparitions, while others have felt sudden drops in temperature or been touched by unseen hands. The house has been featured on numerous paranormal TV shows, including Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters. Many believe the spirits of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters still linger in the house, unable to find peace. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying the eerie atmosphere of the Villisca Axe Murder House. It's a place where the past feels alive, and where the horrors of that night in 1912 seem to echo through the halls. As we close this chapter, we're left with one final question. Will the mystery of the Villisca Axe Murders ever be solved? Or will the killer's identity remain hidden in the shadows, forever out of reach? The truth? I don't think so, but one thing is certain. The echoes of that terrible night will never fade. What do you think happened that night? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.